Hi, hello. Thank you all for lasting the course and for turning up this morning. It's a bit of a test of stamina sometimes, the NDM. So to still be here on the Friday morning and coming to our session, I am hugely appreciative. So thank you all for coming. I'll start making introductions just so we start in good time whilst people drift in. For those who don't know me, my name is Andrew Griffiths, and I head up the demining team in the UK's Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. And I say to you up front, I am a fan of outcomes-based funding and financing for two key reasons. First, they are a way to bring new and diverse forms of funding into this sector. And second, they are a way of delivering enhanced benefits to communities. The two are, of course, connected. What I have here is a really great panel who have experts on this subject, and they are going to bring this, what can be quite a dry subject, alive for you this morning by giving you a bit of theory. I warn you now, there will be a bit of theory. But most importantly, there's going to be a lot of real-life experience and examples here showing how this innovative finance mechanism and how funding for outcomes can actually really reach communities and deliver enhanced benefits to them. And ultimately, that's what we're all about. So what I'd like to do then is just to, without further ado, introduce this really knowledgeable and enthusiastic panel who are delivering what people have been talking about. So I first would like to introduce Charlie Richter, who is the Business Development and US Director at the INGO APOPO. He has been leading the development of the innovative program, expanding both impact and revenue as he's doing that. He's played a central role in what is becoming the iconic Minefields to Rice Fields project in Cambodia. And he's been using the first development impact bond in the mine action sector, but don't let the term development impact bond frighten you. He will tell you what it means in practice. He's been doing mine clearance linked to improved agricultural outcomes, which are benefiting real people, real communities in Cambodia since 2023. And I'm delighted to have him here today. Alongside him, I've got Mark Wilkinson, who is the Global Chief Technical Advisor at Dan Church Aid. He has, following a successful military career, he is now having an equally successful mine action career. He has been leading the inception, design, and implementation of our second innovative finance FCDO-funded project, working in the fragile environment of northeast Syria, which is incredibly demanding. And if we can deliver outcomes-based benefits there, then we can do it anywhere. Really, really challenging, and he's been doing some great work with his team on that. I would also like to introduce Phil Giannichini, who I've almost got it right. I did try. Who is the Executive Director of Hawk Rock Foundation, supporting over 30 organizations globally. He has a host of impressive roles, including my favorite, CEO of the Hong Kong Historic Vessels Foundation. He's also on the board chair of Raise the Children International, and he also works transition of healthy learner in Zambia. He's a member of the US board of APOPO, actively involved in the Minefields to Rice Fields project, and he represents exactly the type of person and the type of institution that we need to attract into the sector. So I'm absolutely delighted that you're sitting on the panel today. Thank you so much for coming. And finally, but not least, Maria Merchant-Wakamara from GICHD, the Innovative Finance Advisor there. She leads the work of the new Innovative Finance Secretariat, focusing on how to apply alternative funding models to mine action. And she's going to tell us a bit about how she's doing that and what her future priorities are. So we'd like to start then with two presentations, which hopefully will just give you the sort of flesh out the story of what we're trying to do. So I'd like to invite Charlie to start.
Thank you, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of APOPO, and want to thank you for the leadership you've shown as a funder in bringing outcomes funding forward in the space. So thank you. Today I'm going to talk a bit about the evolution of minefields to rice fields, which is our signature project in Cambodia that began in 2023 and has now been extended through 2029. So the project started out as a development impact bond. And what is a development impact bond trying to accomplish is the first question. And unlike a traditional grant model where you get money and then you give projections of what you might do, and then the donor's going to pay regardless of what you actually produce, a development impact bond is an outcomes funding approach where we're only paid when we actually deliver. Now, of course, there's a financial structure that's needed around that because you need working capital to start working and to deliver outcomes. And so our first development impact bond, the one we did in 2023, we designed it with Social Finance, who is essentially an innovative finance consultancy firm based in London. We worked very closely with FCDO and Cordaid, a Dutch NGO, who was at that time the agricultural implementer. And I would say the process was a bit lengthy. I mean, it took us 9 months from kind of root of the idea to actually getting the product out there. But in the traditional innovative finance space, that was actually considered quite fast. And I think it was partly because APOPO was so excited about it and Andrew was easy to work with and we were able to bring it together. And what was the upfront capital that allows us to start working before getting the outcomes? It was investors like Phil, who provided us a total amount of money of $410,000. And that allowed us to start working towards outcomes, which we started collecting in month 3 from mine clearance, and then agricultural outcomes that came a bit later, depending on the planting cycle. So the service, Andrew provided, the FCDO provided $2.7 million of outcome funding over 36 months, and that's now been extended, which I'll explain in the next slide. And one facet of the DIB is that investor interest. So the investors are not just giving money to help us as a donation. They expect market rate interest, but the interest is only paid if we reach all of our outcomes. So if any of the outcomes, the first money that's lost if we don't deliver on the outcomes is the investor interest, which essentially means I think there's some hesitation to give investors money with development money. It's only given if we absolutely perform on all of the impact and benefits that we mapped out to do. So it was a good project. I think the whole process got us thinking. It designed a very integrated approach between mine action and agriculture, but it was a bit complicated, I would say. And moving forward, we wanted to design something that would be a bit simpler and potentially also bring in more funders than just outcome funders. So we've transitioned the DIB to an outcomes funding project. And unlike the 9-month process I talked about earlier, APOPO worked directly with our new agricultural partner, who's the Cambodian Institute for Research and Development, CIRD, who's a Cambodian CBO. We had already had a lot of infrastructure in how to map it out and how to put it together an Excel model from the initial phase, but we were able to do it in a week instead of 9 months. We have upfront capital flexibility. So instead of integrating the investors like Phil into FCDO's payments, we took the investment and the upfront capital aside because I think there's been some hesitation from donors, as I said, to pay the interest rate. So we're taking that off the books. It's APOPO's capital. We can also use unrestricted funding or a bank loan. It doesn't matter to start working, which also shows our confidence in being able to deliver because now there's a bit more risk on us. But it also is a model that can easily integrate grants. So we're not just looking for outcome funders, which was kind of, I think at the beginning of the project, it was as much about the innovative financing as the impact. And now we have a great system with really good monitoring and evaluation, great integration, and we just want any funder who's willing to come in to be able to contribute to the project. Now, we prefer outcomes funding, but grant funding is fine as well. So the next 3 years, what's going between 2026 and 29, FCDO has pledged 2.2 million of outcome funding. The Belgian government has given money for this year and will likely extend that for an additional 5 years. And then APOPO currently has some unrestricted capital, unrestricted funding pledged to the project, though we're of course hoping to replace that with new funders and potentially expand the project as well in the future. So one key thing about the outcomes funding project is that we're incentivized the Mine Action organization to work really closely with the agricultural organization. And I think one of the key components has been ESRI infrastructure. Mine Action is really good at taking data on a very specific square meter by square meter basis, and that's very applicable to agriculture. And so we have been working on the monitoring systems, integrating SEERD and CORDAID before that into that. And the project is about 80% Mine Action if you just look at the budget costs, and 20% agriculture. But the outcome payments, what we're paid for is of the 2.2 million, 1.1 million of that is for square meters produced. Another 1.1 million is for first training farmers and then actually showing that they increase their income on the fields where they're working. And so that makes sure that we need to work closely with agriculture, because if we don't produce, then our Mine Action budgets aren't reached as well. And the other thing that's been with this more flexible funding model is we've been able to more closely integrate CMAA and CMAC, the Cambodia Mine Action Authority, and Cambodia Mine Action Center. And so we're not just doing agricultural work on the land that we clear, we're also opening it up to CMAC areas so that we can extend the agriculture benefits to more areas and also have direct buy-in from the government. So this is just a quick rundown of the outcomes over 6 years and how they have adapted recently. The main outcome we've always been really going for is increased income on hectares that are being farmed and were previously had mine contamination in them. The first project focused solely on rice because that was something we knew every village in Cambodia basically was growing, and it would be the easiest thing to have quick income gains with. But in the next project, we're being more flexible, more diverse. One of the things we really want to do is make people more climate resilient through income diversification. So when you're just growing rice, of course, and if something happens with the rice crop, you're going to be more vulnerable. But if we give folks more activities that are a bit more climate resilient themselves, they themselves will be more resilient. We're also integrating cashews, which the complicated thing with cashews is it takes around 5 years, so we're actually using income projections. But I think that's a testament to the faith Andrew's developed in us working and producing results that we were able to do that. But cashews also actually have more potential income value for farmers over the long haul. So the contract and project management, it might sound like it's actually more complicated than it is, I think. I think in general, it's more simple than the average Mine Action grant, to be honest. We hold all contracts with the subgrantees, FCDO, and also the investors, APOPO does. So there's not any sort of integrated third party that's sending out the money, which I think was also key for us being able to get it done in 9 months now, and then 1 month, the week-long process that I mentioned for the current project. Everything's recorded on ESRI, which I think that's a huge advantage Mine Action has for outcome funding, is we are so good, the ESRI data's there. A lot of times it's verified already by Mine Action Authority, and with agriculture, the increased use of drones that we have, you can take aerial proof of what you do. You don't necessarily need expensive monitoring and evaluation firms to prove our impact, which is a real advantage for the sector. We just send out quarterly progress reports to FCDO and investors. Outcome funding is claimed quarterly for Mine Action, and it's seasonal with the agriculture, so that comes in at 6 months and 12 months generally from the start of the year. There's no line item accounting, which is great because we're getting paid for the outcomes, but it actually simplifies the financial management during the project a lot, while there might be a little bit more complexity before it begins. The Belgian government that has been integrated in, this is through an existing development 5-year protocol or 5-year program that they have. We still send them all of their normal reports, but they also benefit from all of the really good ESRI data that we're getting as a result of needing to report to Andrew. So they're we're checking both boxes there. And then our outcome targets and prices. The first year, the first iteration, we actually set targets for 2 years, which didn't really fit in with the traditional mine action cycles, where you're allocated land and often, in the fourth quarter of the year to begin project in the first quarter. Now it's more flexible. We set the targets based off a baseline survey we take in the areas that CMAA and CMAC already are given to us. So it's really trying to be much more flexible within the traditional process of mine action. And I think some of the things I'm most excited about in this next iteration is we actually launched a branded product for our rice, which is it's called Peace Rice. It's available for sale at our visitor center in Cambodia, but also in various organic supermarkets in Phnom Penh. And our hope is if it does well in Cambodia, it tells the story of mine action on the back, and it's a product that's still in development, but that we can potentially export it to the West if it does well in Cambodia, and it'll help tell more about the story of mine action and integrated agricultural development to wider audiences. More emphasis on regenerative and eco-friendly agriculture. So APOPO has a synthropic farming program, which we're going to be integrating, but we're also doing things like teaching rice farmers to put cover crops on their rice farms between the planting season, which helps to reduce greenhouse emissions. And the first project used Baker Tilly, who's a typical auditing firm in Cambodia, or global one, to actually call farmers to verify the income gains that we were going for in the project. We're hoping to transition this to a new platform called Common Good Marketplace, which does the verification that Baker Tilly would do, and they're experts in monitoring evaluation, but they're actually trying to create kind of the carbon credits for social impact, and they're going to be selling those credits to potential corporate donors and philanthropists who want to buy outcome products. But they're part of this whole belief that I think Andrew and I totally agree on, that this process needs to be more simple and more attainable for everyone to scale. And I'm hoping that through our project, we're going to set a standard for the mine action community to have verified impact assets that then can be available for other implementers to go on the marketplace and sell. I mean, it's a startup, but it's getting traction, and I think there's a lot of interest from philanthropists and corporations. And then also, we've discussed potentially developing a toolkit. I don't think that the sector should necessarily have to go through the 9-month process that we did and the complicated, potential expensive design. I'm hoping that they can learn and advance to the steps that we got through trial and error. So thank you, and I'll pass it on to Mark.
Cool. Thanks, Charlie. So we're going to just move on to look at another FCDO innovative finance project, which is being delivered by DCA in northeast Syria. In some ways, very, very similar to what APOPO are doing in Cambodia. In other contexts, certainly very, very different. And by way of a brief introduction, and to probably highlight the biggest difference between delivering this project in northeast Syria and Cambodia is just the sheer scale of needs within Syria. As the slide says here, almost 17 million people in Syria in need of assistance. 90% of those living below the poverty line, and almost 7 million more internally displaced. That places huge challenges on a very, very fragile country and a very, very fragile humanitarian system. The humanitarian mine action needs equally huge, restricting access to land, restricting access to urban areas within almost half of Syria's sub-districts, and as in many other places around the world, with a disproportionate impact on children and on livelihoods. So this project was very much deliberately actually aimed to try to deliver a mine action intervention within a fragile and conflict-affected state, with all of the challenges that brought, but in a way where mine action was a true enabler for broader livelihood development. And just by way of background to the project, so the genesis of this project was actually in late 2024, where UK FCDO launched the tendering process for this project with 4 really important aims, which were important to underpin the design of the project. The first was to continue the learning that Charlie and APOPO had gathered from Cambodia and continue to demonstrate the potential for the use of innovative finance mechanisms within HMA. And that was absolutely key through the design process. Next, linked to this whole idea of mine action as an enabler, mine action generating net benefit for livelihoods, was the intention of strengthening coordination between HMA interventions and their associated livelihood activities. And all of that was meant to try to really help with the process of enabling socioeconomic recovery. Increasing understanding of outcome-based finance mechanisms, specifically within difficult contexts. And clearly, as I've just said, Syria was and still is a very, very difficult context, even just to deliver a straightforward grant-funded mine action intervention with so much going on, particularly related to security, political change, development of national authorities and so on. So that was a very, very clear aim of the project as well. Finally, and I know Charlie's already said something about this, to design the project in such a way that there was verifiable impact and ideally longer term impact of how Syrian people could begin the process of rebuilding their lives off the back of this innovative finance project. The project itself, I was asked to speak specifically about the kind of initial project design. We very much kind of went back to basics to look at the best way to structure this project against the requirements that FCDO had, and later on actually against some of the learning that APOPO shared with us. There were three real clear drivers for the design work that took place. There was the do no harm element. There was the needs, off the back of Charlie's comments certainly, to keep the project design as simple and as flexible as possible. And it subsequently became very, very clear just how important that pillar was in the design process, with the amount of change that went on in Syria through 2025. The need to have a project design that could be amended, could be shifted, could be altered and focused was very, very important for us to be able to keep delivering results. The financial model, in the same way, needed to be simple, it needed to be flexible, and in the simplest possible terms, the graphic on the bottom right of the screen there kind of illustrates how that financial model worked. We need an investor. The investor puts the money in to cover the operating costs of us as the implementer. We deliver outputs and subsequent outcomes. They're independently verified. The donor agrees with the verification. The donor pays the investor the money back along with interest on that investment. And in an ideal world, the investor then reinvests that amount of money into the project. It's incredibly complicated, I won't lie to anyone at all. But we really, really tried to keep this very simple model in mind through the process, because for all of the financial, technical, economic work that went into this, not all delivered by DCA, I might add, fundamentally it was trying to drive that model. The final element, which has been incredibly important, I think, to FCDO, is this idea of learning in the first instance, that every step of APOPO's journey as well as our journey has been so important to gather learning. What works, what doesn't work, why doesn't it work, what do we need to do differently, how can we better communicate that across the mine action sector to try to help other projects to launch. Finally, I can't even say it, replicability, to try to design a model that isn't just of use in Syria as a fragile and conflict-affected state, but gives very, very sound building blocks that could be transposed into similar environments in other places in the world. And that was also a key pillar, because it's a very, very good way to ensure that the design of the project is kept in a very, very logical format, that the work that's completed is properly captured and recorded as we go through. On top of that, we had really 4 guiding principles that were very, very important to carry through the project design phase as well. The first, I've already kind of mentioned this, it was so important to keep in our minds all the time that HMA was working as an enabler. What this project was about was not clearing, for example, agricultural land in Raqqa Governorate. It was about clearing lands so that we could then help local people to reinstate agricultural systems within those areas, whether that was providing training, whether it was environmentally sensitive methods for them to work by, whether it was digging boreholes, whether it was providing irrigation equipment, or even just opening up access to local markets. Mine Action was the enabler for all of that work to take place, but the project was always going to be judged based upon its ability to improve those livelihoods with clear economic gain. The project itself took a very contextualized approach. We wanted to assist Syrians in urban as well as rural contexts. We were very, very aware that the types of livelihoods, the way people lived their lives differed vastly between urban and rural contexts. And that meant that the project design needed to be sympathetic and sensitive to those different needs as well. At the same time, it still needed to be simple within a simple project design. The flexibility was absolutely key. I think when we began this project, we had absolutely no idea of the absolute tumultuous change that was going to take place in Syria through 2025. But I think it really vindicated taking an approach where the model we developed for work really built in flexibility and ability to stop working in one area, move to another area, to shift the balance of funding for a period of time from mine action to livelihoods, to recognize when types of interventions maybe weren't working and be able to shift the focus. And all of that is possible within the model that we were working in. In terms of intervention requirements, we really tried to minimize the intervention requirements for the project. If you like, this is the criteria that allow us to decide where we needed to be working. And that's also very closely aligned with the need for simplicity and flexibility within the project. The project design itself, really 3 phases of design. There was a 4-month design phase. This was very much a desktop office-based design phase to really try to bring all of those elements together, to look at the way that we were already working in Syria and to see how that we could really bring together all of that learning, all of that knowledge into a project that was able to work on an outcome-based financing mechanism. Following that, there was an 11-month proof of concept phase that had urban and rural objectives within it. So in line with what I've just said, we were trying to target rural and urban areas within activities. And then a systematic pilot phase, which we're currently in, where we're gradually transitioning to an outcome-based finance mechanism. I won't go through the detail there, but there's some information regarding the scale of those different phases of the activity. So Andrew asked specifically for a few comments on why the proof of concept phase was so important. And I think that the kind of header here says a lot, really. It's really important, but it brings with it a fair amount of kind of cold, hard reality. Sometimes the context changes significantly. We knew what we were working in Syria, but it would be more than fair to say we had absolutely no idea as an organization delivering mine action in northeast Syria, what was going to happen in 2025 and what a huge, huge challenge that was going to face. And we went through periods of doing no clearance work at all, of having to evacuate staff from the country, seeing the Northeast Syria Mine Action Office effectively disappear, having to re-register in Damascus. There was just challenge after challenge after challenge, which is, I suppose, testament to the country team who are with us in the room at the moment, but as well as the way the model was actually built. Another challenge that became very, very clear was that whilst there's a need to identify work areas for an outcome-based project well in advance, in a fragile and conflict-affected state, it's very, very hard to do that. When we designed the project at the end of 24, beginning of 25, the kind of political security situation was very, very different to the one that we found ourselves in when we transitioned into the actual operational elements of those activities. Again, flexibility in project design is absolutely key there. Proving a concept needs evidence, obviously, but in a project where mine action is enabling a livelihood development, it takes time to generate the results that you need to prove that that intervention actually worked. And I think one of the key learnings that came out of the proof of concept phase was that there wasn't sufficient time to effectively be able to prove the model worked. And one reason for that, for example, on the agricultural side, was as simple as the crop cycles for planting and harvesting and getting crop to market didn't sync entirely with the project time cycle that we had. And there were loads of reasons for that, some of them on us in DCA, some related to the security situation, some related to internal GMAP-related issues as well. But evidence is absolutely key. So we're now in the process of generating more evidence to provide really a much, much stronger argument for the transition to outcome-based finance. I'm going to echo everything Charlie's just said about development impact bonds. They can be very, very complicated. We used an outcome-based finance company called Instiglio, who have a huge amount of experience across the humanitarian sector. And it was very, very clear that they were very, very good at what they did, but it was very hard for us within the roles we held within DCA to perhaps have the depth of understanding that we needed to have to follow that. And I think for that reason, for us, whilst we weren't told to deliver an outcome-based finance solution, for us, the DIB element very naturally became an outcome-based finance solution for those and many other reasons. The final point related to the proof of concept phase, and this I think is where we do differ significantly from APOPO, because we're working in a fragile and conflict-affected state, finding investors is really, really difficult. For some investors at the time we were really beginning the pitch, Syria was still under international sanctions regimes that ruled out a number of otherwise might have been interested parties. The project value wasn't high enough. The rate of return couldn't be high enough because of the types of activities we had. It's really, really difficult, and it's taken us a fairly significant amount of time to begin to crack how we can encourage private external investment into the project. Just to finish up, in terms of achievements to date, I think some of the biggest achievements actually are really sitting at the front of the room here. In the first instance, Andrew and his team at FCDO, it's been absolutely actually quite staggering to see the patience and support that FCDO have had to see this project through. There were times when I'd mumbled in HQ, we're going to get cut, we can't deliver what we're supposed to be doing. And Andrew and his team have been absolutely nothing but encouraging, taking that really long-term view, giving us the time and space that we've needed to begin to generate the results that he wanted. I've put in brackets and friends as well, and certainly Charlie and APOPO, the support that they've given to DCA has been absolutely incredible. There have been no secrets, to the point where I don't want to get you in trouble. Charlie's shared absolutely everything that they have used in their design work of this project, and some of that has been so important for us to not make the same mistakes, to build on the learning that they've had. We've also had help from Geneva Centre as well, and I know you work very quietly behind the scenes at the moment, but the work that Geneva Centre has put into trying to build the profile of innovative finance has been really, really impressive as well. I put another achievement as keeping going. It kind of links to the point I've just made about Andrew and the support of his team. It's been so difficult to try to keep a focus on delivering this project whilst trying to secure external investment, whilst responding to all of the challenges that northeast Syria, now Syria, has thrown at us. We have refined the concept. We have shifted a focus predominantly to rural interventions, and we've begun the process of transitioning to an outcome-based finance model. And I'm glad that this conference is towards the end of April, because it's only actually in the last couple of weeks that DCA secured its first external investor into this project through the Korsholm family, who effectively are high net worth individuals within Denmark. They have a foundation tool called Tagola, and they have pledged to provide 10% of the total project budget across the first 2 years of implementation. And given all of the challenges we faced, I think that's a real significant achievement for the project. That's it for me. Philip, across to you.
I'm sorry, can I cue you up?
Sorry.
So thank you. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, Mark. Really, it was super helpful. I'm going to turn now to Phil, if I may, and I'm going to tee you up with a two-part question. I'm going to ask first, Hawk Rock Foundation has a really strong, proud record of charitable funding and has been providing upfront finance to the Minefield to Ricefield project. So I have a two-part question. What do you like about outcome-based funding? And what attracts you to the mine action sector?
Can everybody hear me? Well, it's great to be here, and any chance we get to advocate for APOPO and the great work that they're doing, we like to take it. I agree with you, Andrew. I love outcomes-based funding. You made me a bit nervous when you said we're going to bring it to life today, but I'm glad Will and Charlie stepped in so I didn't have to do that. But I mean, we like it for three main reasons. Firstly, it's incentive aligned. All parties agree on what we're trying to achieve and how we're going to get there. Why we like that is because we can write checks, and we do, and we can put our faith and trust in an organization to deliver on what could be promising ideas. But it's also nice to have skin in the game and to think about what we're trying to achieve and have those measurable outcomes, and then trying to work together to get to those. So that's number one. Number two is accountability and just general transparency. You'd mentioned earlier on about what works well and what doesn't, and tweaking along the way. When you have these clearly defined objectives and these goals, which you do in the outcomes funding model, you can work along the way to identify some of the things that are working really well and some of the things that aren't. Charlie updates us once a quarter, so we really know what's going on. Often, as a funder or for foundations, we write a check, and then it's a hope and a prayer, and we understand that's how it is. But we don't know until the end if it's worked or even if it's worked at all. With outcomes-based funding, that kind of goes away. You can track, and we really like that accountability, and we really like that organizations hold themselves to that. And then the final one I have here, it's cost-effective. If there's economics involved, if you're thinking about financial return, and I know we struggled as a foundation as well. We struggled, like, do we want to be involved in something like this where you pay back to investors? But if there's a financial return, and these types of investors can then reinvest in these projects, make some return, but also put more money back into these projects, and ones that work because they've proven that they can work, I think that's a great thing. And APOPO is particularly interesting in that regard, because if you can clear lots of land while maintaining safety, but in a cheaper way and in a quick way, then the economics get better. If the economics get better, the returns are better, and then you've got better, higher household income, and then potentially more money to go back into the projects. So that's why we like it. And your second question, sorry? Oh, what got us into mine action?
In particular, why this sector?
It's APOPO. We're a small foundation. We don't have an overarching goal or objective, and that's deliberate. We want to be able to invest and support anything that we find interesting, and we like to support innovative ideas. There's some big investment expertise within our foundation, and so when we get ideas like APOPO, when we see costs coming down and results going up, it kind of gets us interested. And then Charlie took us to Cambodia, and then that was it. We saw the project. We met a rat. We met people who were using the land that had been cleared for farming, and that showed us the power of what was being done.
Cool. Thank you so much, Phil. I mean, this is what it's all about, really. It's about the sector building a dialogue with private institutions, understanding why, what attracts them, telling them the right stories, giving them the right levels of reassurance, and thanks for bringing that to life.
Can I just add to that point, Will? If any of these investors that you're struggling with want to chat, that's what we want to do. We want to meet other investors, try and convince them of the merits of the project. So happy to get involved there.
That's brilliant. I think that's a wonderful segue also to Maria, because I know that that's some of the sort of things you want to you want to do as well. So if I find my notes and the right page, Maria, so I'd like to ask you a question to tee you up. GICHD has established an innovative finance secretariat last year with funding from UK, Netherlands and the EU. Why do you think it is important for the mine action sector to have a focal point for dialogue with private investors? And what are your priorities for next year?
Thank you, Andrew. First, of course, I would like to say that we are very grateful for the support of the UK and our other partners, our other donors. And I can only echo also Philip's offer in that sense to answer to your question. We think that one of the main advantages of having a sectorial focal point is to be able to build this common language and to help centralize all of this progress. So when other actors need to be appealed to, we will know how to communicate with them. I'm going to be a bit free with the content of the slides, but please feel free to read them. I think that maybe to give 3 concrete reasons as to why it makes sense to have an innovative finance secretariat. Right now we are 2 people, me and my colleague, Tim van Dorne, who's here on the first row, and maybe you have had the occasion to discuss with as well, is to develop this structure framework, this common language, common reference. Something we have identified is that up until now in the sector, there was not a lot of understanding of the different types of capital or private capital you can appeal to and what that entails. So here we are starting to already become familiar with return on investment, socioeconomic impact, how that is measured, repayment, conditional, non-conditional, outcome-based. I think it's important if we all align and we know what it means for mine action. This is work that we are already carrying out. We have a glossary in our website for commonly used innovative finance terms, also for your perusal. And we are very open, of course. Our aim is to support the sector at large, so be it operators, be it the national mine action authorities, we will be very willing to help you have an understanding of that. Understanding incentives, I think it also goes to Philip's point. These different actors, if we want to move beyond or besides grants, it's important to understand what economic incentives they have and also what kind of incentives in terms of delivery and results having a different funding system can create, whether it's to generate revenue, whether it's to make sure that you comply with certain metrics like hectares clear, whether it is to prove that a form of livelihood is becoming enabled. I think that's important also to understand what kind of capital and what kind of system can be aligned to what you want to produce, and then build a practical approach. So, okay, we have the language, we have an understanding of what our partners want to see, how we can measure it, how it impacts the projects on the ground, how can this be articulated in practice. I think that could be probably the main merit. I wanted to present you with this because I think it's important also, it can be a visual way to sum up what our colleagues were saying, and I am extremely grateful that they presented for us their applied conclusions after having done this important work on the ground. Mine action, to my understanding, is in the below market conditions, and this is nothing negative per se. It is to account for the fact that there are risks involved, and how we manage this risk is fundamental if we want to explore other funding architectures. I think that was the first question, Andrew, but did I miss anything?
No, that's really clear. Do you want to talk a little bit about where you're going?
Yeah, the objectives indeed. So this is, we are very happy to share this content. It's still discussing a bit what matters to bring different funding streams. I know that in the afternoon before the closing, we will also have a plenary discussing these items. This is part of our objectives for next year. We want to understand exactly what we need to do to be able to appeal to, for instance, philanthropists. We are thinking also multilateral and development banks, and we are thinking of applying this innovative finance layer to public funds, and outcome-based funding, I think, is a paradigmatic example of how it can be done. Also, what we have learned from the private sector so far, so we can continue engaging with private sector, and again, understanding not all private sector is the same, and understanding that some of these incentives are very relevant still for public funding. Importance of understanding those incentives understanding this kind of market segmentation. Are we talking to a philanthropy? Are we talking to a foundation? Are we talking to a commercial bank? What that this means? And then, of course, legitimacy and the role of public commitment. At the end of the day, we have also spoken of do no harm principles and keeping the humanitarian angle very much in our mind. I think that for Mine Action, we are trying to address a paradigmatic question. How do we fund for public goods? And how do we account for this positive socioeconomic impact on livelihoods, on reconstruction and recovery? And this will be, I think, our final overview. So in the next year, I think that to be a bit more concrete, since this is fairly high level, what you can expect from our team, we already have an investment case prepared on a front-loading facility, hypothetical potential for Mine Action. So how we could translate bond issuance to the Mine Action sector. And we want, once that is ready, we want to delve a bit more in indeed how we can partner primarily with multilateral development banks, because that is, if you remember the graphic, the segment within we are at, and we want to come up with a very practical paper on what could be a successful protocol to frame Mine Action in a way that can be included in broader recovery, reconstruction programs and projects. So this is kind of the, let's say, guiding principles, but in terms of concrete outcomes, I think that is one we are very much looking forward to providing, while taking stock, of course, of everything that is going on with outcome-based funding. I am also singularly grateful to both Mark and Charlie. They are members of our Innovative Finance Technical Working Group at the center. We have learned a lot from them, and we hope that we keep this partnership, because understanding also the realities on the ground, it's essential to make sure we provide good language, good metrics, good solutions, good potential funding architectures.
Cool. Thank you, Maria. Thank you to all the panelists. So I think we have a little bit of time for questions from the floor. So we thank you all for staying with us. If you would like to get involved in this session, then if you'd like to indicate if you'd like to come in and ask a question, now is your opportunity. I can see a hand raised over there. Yes.
Hi, my name is Sonia Mravit. I'm working for UNMAS, dealing with budget and finance since 2007. Right now, we have in New York is a very hot debate. The next SG is being shaped, and definitely a typical question that is being asked for the next SG, how to get us out of the financial crisis. And these innovative financing mechanisms, they are on the table. And I wonder, how are you feeding into this type of debates? How to fund the humanitarian crisis, not to depend on member states' goodwill, but integrate the public sector. And it would be good that these initiatives are on the radar for whoever is going to be the new SG. UNMAS operates in oil-rich countries that are not getting, unfortunately, their act together to finance their mine action. It's very hard for us to fundraise for mine-affected countries like Nigeria, Libya, Iraq, because many donors, they say they should find a way to finance it. Did you ever consider working with oil companies who are wanting to get back to oil exploration, but because of mine contamination? And again, Mine Action is an enabler wherever you are. Also, the World Bank, IMF, all these innovative financing, I'm not so sure, cryptocurrency also sometimes comes around the table. If you have any ideas in that sense, and how can we all get involved in this, especially as we are getting a new SG? Thank you.
No, thank you. That's covered a lot of ground. I'll try to at least attempt to cover it. I think some really good points about how you mainstream the innovative finance concepts within the architecture as we go forward. I mean, I'll let other panelists come in, but for what it's worth, from my perspective, there's a broad ecology of different types of diverse alternative funding mechanisms which are applicable in different contexts at different times, but which all have a common theme about bringing in diverse funding and focusing on sort of payment by results, by outcomes. There is a lot of work I think we can do in terms of risk reduction to allow investment in more fragile contexts. There's a lot of work we can do, I think, on corporate responsibility. I think including with regard to working with oil companies in terms of offering a way to show corporate responsibility and a way to sort of engage with local communities in that way. I think it's really important to think about how, where you've got, given we are challenged now across the board to cover all the needs across every context, and given that donors tend to be drawn towards crisis situations, I think the potential to work with the tangible offers that the mine action sector does and can provide, and the enabling mechanisms it can do in sort of legacy countries which are now quite developed and quite benign conditions, and where the opportunity for development and sort of economic return is great. For example, I would suggest Angola, for example, as one country there. I think bringing the expertise in this room and sort of sharing that, I think there's a real opportunity for some of those sort of legacy countries to piggyback on some of the mechanisms and gain some more funding for clearance that really has a sort of immediate direct benefit, whether that's for tourism, whether that's for agriculture, whether that's for energy, or indeed whether that's for environment, feeding into sort of ICF objectives as well. So I'm not sure I've covered everything, but I do think it's important to mainstream it. I do think it should be part of the architecture, and certainly the UK will be supporting and advocating for that in New York. I don't know if anyone else would like to come in on that.
And I don't know if this will be a direct response to your question, but I think it's still related. I mean, I think one of the important things to remember about outcomes-based financing is that it makes you work better, right? It's not just that it's going to bring more capital immediately, but if it makes us work better, it aligns us more with development, and it makes us look responsible and more attractive than other potential areas of philanthropy, then money will eventually come into the sector. So it's both a way to bring in new money, but it's also a way to motivate more money coming in. So I think that's important. And I think in order to bring in more corporates, as Andrew discussed, keeping it as simple as possible, making sure they know that this isn't going to be something they need to invest millions of dollars for design in, that it's there, it's on the table, it's matched by the government, the systems are all set up, and they just have to pay when they see an outcome there that's hopefully cheaply verified, is what will ultimately help get it traction as much as anything else.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. And firstly, Mark said it was complex. Sorry, not Will. I've been getting that wrong. So I can't read. But echoing Charlie's point, complexity turns off funders. When we first saw the first draft of the development impact bond, it was a lot of pages, a lot of tabs, and we couldn't really figure it out. And then it got simplified, and we got more interested. We could understand a lot better. And so keeping things simple will help funders come in.
Well, thank you for your question. I think on our end, what I observe is that the sector has come to a reckoning, and a reckoning that money that doesn't have to be repaid or that doesn't have a lot of controls or conditionality will no longer be readily available. And I think that in terms of mainstreaming innovative finance, in which I echo Andrew's points, and for that, of course, personally and on behalf of our unit, count on our support to produce any kind of reports or to convene any kind of meetings that could be useful to that effect, being also an international organization within the ecosystem, right, at the center. But with that said, I see these kind of two parallel tracks. One is how we use public funds and whether the model of grants is sufficient enough, and how we can ensure that we privilege having these unconditional, non-repayment funds available for the situations that absolutely require them, because it's going to shrink, it's going to get smaller. And the second is this kind of spectrum, moving from this concessional capital, which eventually has to be repaid in many cases, but that captures more so the positive socio-economic elements and can open a discussion also on national ownership, because who repays? Normally, it's because the mine-affected country or donors that can support that, like through outcome-based funding, for instance. Eventually, you might need to pay that interest to the investors that provide the working capital at first. That is a cost that you think is worth the spillover effects and the positive impact you're going to generate, because you're linking it to livelihoods, because you're linking it to precise outcomes, because when we are discussing multilateral development banks and starting to explore that potential partnership, you're linking it to recovery and reconstruction. So that is kind of the medium part. And then indeed, full corporates, either corporate social responsibility for things that still touch upon public goods, and for that, indeed, you need to speak their language, know how to articulate these projects so they can understand them within the point of view, or looking at market rates, which could be even commercial loans if we want to go there as a sector. But I think these are the three probably spaces that we can start exploring, using public money differently, or being, I don't want to say creative, I guess innovative, but thinking indeed about the outcomes, thinking indeed about the conditions that are attached to it, thinking about prioritization. Our sector knows a lot in Mine Action about prioritization. What are purely public goods that do need, unconditional funding, and then trying to see in concessional funding terms. So it has to be repaid, but in not extremely demanding terms, or not at market rate cost. What can we do to link those, basically to capture these socioeconomic benefits, this enabling aspect of Mine Action, when pure return on investment might not be there because it's a risky endeavor, whether we can link it to the broader recovery and reconstruction discussion, because we understand that the positive effects that will be generated from Mine Action will be able to give us the added value to compensate for the relative cost of trying something that is not purely a grant, right? I think that's how I see it. And in terms of concrete engagement at the UN, or we were created in a sense for that, right? So very happy to undertake that at any point.
I think a lot of it is about telling the right story. And once you get out of a weeds, outcomes-based and outcomes focus gives you a really good story to tell. But please.
Thank you. Matthias Bräunlich from MEC. So working in the outcome-based finance space for a long time in different sectors, I've seen that the problem lies not so much on raising the investment capital, as long as you have a great project which is well defined with good targets, good outcomes. You'll find investors, money is there. What has become the overall understanding is the problem is more on the outcome-based finance, on the outcome side, basically. And of course, we need governments to step in especially in the mine action space, because we deliver actually outcomes for the host countries, right? So I wonder how that understanding can be increased within governments, especially. But then, of course, there's also others who could be interested in paying for outcomes, right? We've talked about this a lot in the mine action space. So I guess there's also a lot of work to do for mine action actors to make audiences understand what these outcomes are good for and who should be interested in paying for these outcomes, right? So I put this out here just because, colleagues sitting up there doing it already, we are getting there, and it's a nut to crack in order to be successful. Thank you.
Come in on that, Charlie.
You're the donor. Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely, like, FCDO has been an absolute leader in paving the way for outcomes funding, and for that they should be applauded. From my understanding, I think for a lot of donors, they're already very busy, right? They already have a lot of complexity. And then to try to bring on something new like outcomes-based financing is another work stream for them. But I think what they really should understand is it might be a little bit more work now to get this set up. But as I said, like, our reporting, because it's just solely focused on our impact, you reduce the financial complexity, you reduce a lot of the other things that they handle. So I think it goes back to this message. It needs to be viewed as a simple thing, right? If it's a simple thing, then I think more donors will come along as well. So I don't have the magic solution for that. Like, you know, we would very much like another outcomes funder to come in. And I think the other way that we're taking that into account is by having this hybrid model where we can take in grants. But ultimately, I do think it will be good also for donors themselves to get more funding allocated if people know that it's going to be outcome associated, not just a grant that who knows.
Yeah, just very quickly, I totally agree with what you've just said there. I think there's another element, though, that there is still a real lack of understanding / misunderstanding of what it is we're actually talking about. And I can speak, even within DCA, I think that there are different views, different understandings of what this project actually is. And I know, Maria, you're putting a huge amount of work into this at the moment, but I think there's a real need for the sector to establish a shared understanding of exactly what it is we're talking about. And ideally, we need to try to build models that are repeatable, that we can take the knowledge we've got, we can apply them in different contexts, and we can add new learning onto that to develop projects that can be shared, can be applied universally, that are built on the same understanding. I think in terms of getting investors, getting people to actually put money into projects, if it's clear what the money's going into, I think that goes some way to address some of the concerns over risk, even in those fragile conflict-affected states. So I think there's a lot of work still to be done. I think this project, and certainly with the drive of FCDO, is a really good way to begin to develop that knowledge base and share that more widely.
So I'm going to try and squeeze in one last question before we wrap up the session. I think you'd like to come in.
Yeah, hi, Crystal, representative of UNMAS here. Well, I really want to thank you, Andrew, and the UK for your leadership on innovative financing. It's been 5 years, I think you've started this. I know everybody's impatient to get results, but it's taking time, but I think it will pay off. I hope you will continue. Thank you so much also to APOPO and DCA for sharing your examples from a kind of peace type of country, and also a country that's still affected by conflict. I think in trying to do that in Colombia was incredibly brave given all the challenges. But I also want to invite you, we have plenary this afternoon, 5, to continue this conversation. It's really important that you all come and participate. We want to attract more foundations to explain, the incredible opportunity that the mine action sector has to offer. There is a challenge, I think, for mine action organization, not only including or incorporating this innovative financing language. And by the way, we have a fabulous glossary online in 3 languages, thanks to Maria on the NGM program website, but also to integrate the combination with other sectors. So for instance, if you take money from a donor to do a program that's beyond mine action and is going to deliver agricultural results, what do you need in terms of your own capacity to be able to monitor the result of this program? You need partnerships, you need joint risk-taking, and the donors need to understand that in terms of the way they fund different organizations to help this collaboration. Thank you.
No, thank you, and a point well made about the plenary session this afternoon. So I think I'd just like to conclude by just sort of underlining, the FCDO, the UK will continue to work in this area. We do feel that it's going to be an essential tool for the sector going forward. We will continue to offer opportunities for other donors. I think looking at hybrid solutions that allows donors to test for water without committing at the beginning to a complete outcome-funded model will help on that. And I think also the proven value for money and the value for money across a range of objectives, not just for mine action, but in the livelihoods thing, I think that's going to become increasingly attractive for donors as funding contracts, and the ability to deliver at multiple levels, I think will become much more attractive. So my glass is half full, and we continue. And on that note, I would like to again thank all my panelists for covering a lot of ground, and hopefully bringing a few more fans out in the audience today. Thank you so much.